Welcome to the Asbestos Knowledge Empire.
What does asbestos management mean to you?
I used to really struggle with the asbestos management at my site, but now it's a breeze.
It used to be really expensive. I was paying loads, but now I've got my asbestos power team in place. It's so much easier.
Asbestos can be a pain in the arse if not handled right.
We had to stop the job because asbestos was discovered. Now we don't have that problem.
Asbestos management is easier than you think. Asbestos management. Be proactive, not reactive. Think about asbestos first, not last.
And now your hosts, best-selling authors and asbestos experts, Ian Stone and Neil Munro.
Hello, welcome to the Asbestos Knowledge Empire. I'm Ian Stone.
And I'm Neil Munro.
So today we're going to talk about asbestos and emergency situations, what goes wrong, when it goes wrong, how it goes wrong, who's affected, and everything in and around that subject.
And how to control and minimise the risk from those situations.
Exactly that. So first, before we get into it all, who's at risk?
So who is at risk of coming into contact with asbestos? And really, that comes down to the list of the trades that's given in the approved code of practice. And that's basically anyone and everyone. So that includes general maintenance staff.
Sparkies, plumbers.
Yeah, gas fitters, painters and decorators.
Carpenters, roofers.
Yeah, plasterers, demolition workers.
Construction workers, heating engineers, telecommunication engineers.
Yeah, fire and burglar alarm installers, architects, building surveyors and other such professionals. And basically anyone and everyone that's working in and on buildings.
Yeah, the architects and building surveyors one's always it surprises people. But if you think about what they're doing in their day-to-day roles and their jobs, they are going into buildings. They might not know what's in that building. So it isn't just the actual physical workers working on the building. It's people entering these buildings that may come across asbestos.
Yes, just to give you a bit of perspective in what the actual risk and what the actual epidemic and problem is with asbestos, just to give you some figures. These are based on the latest figures produced in October last year, 2018. So in 2016, there were 2,595 mesothelioma deaths caused by past exposure to asbestos. Okay, so that's quite a large figure. And they actually marry that figure to lung cancers as well. So that it's roughly about the same. So another 2,500 related lung cancer deaths.
It's a big figure, and it's just still increasing year on year, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a funny one because when we came into the asbestos industry, sort of early 2000s, they thought the peak for asbestos-related mesothelioma deaths would actually reach at the year 2010.
Yeah, 2010 was going to be the peak year. And now we're supposed to be on the slope downwards.
But they've actually increased that, and they now predict it to reach its peak in 2022. And who knows, when we get there, it could be projected on again.
Yeah, exactly. Because, at the moment, like I say, the figures year on year are still going up. So hopefully we do hit that peak sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
Because then if less people are dying, it means less people are being exposed. And we're kind of achieving what we need to achieve as an industry.
When we talk to people about asbestos-related diseases, most people are aware of the word asbestosis. Asbestosis is an asbestos-related disease, but it's only affecting the figures of around 500 deaths per year now, and that's based on 2016 figures. So as you can see, lots of people associated that as the main disease, but it's really not. If you look at the difference between 500 asbestosis deaths compared to the mesothelioma deaths, and there's a big difference there. And that's really affected around, asbestosis is dose-related, so you have to be exposed to quite a lot of asbestos fibre, and we're not really getting those exposures these days.
No, I mean, those sorts of exposures come from the old factory workers and things like that, working with the raw material, making the products and using it on a day-to-day basis, rather than the kind of secondary exposures where you're not working with it all the while, but coming across it in your work, such as plumbers and carpenters using it and sawing it and things like that.
Yeah, so whereas the mesothelioma deaths, now that's linked to short duration, low exposures, which relates to more incidental or accidental exposures to asbestos. That's why the mesothelioma death rate is still increasing, because we are still accidentally exposing ourselves to asbestos in and around buildings and working in buildings.
Yeah, and unnecessarily as well. People are still being exposed because people aren't following the regs and having surveys carried out and things like that.
Yeah, so all in all, we're looking at sort of around the 5,000 mark, 5,500 of people in the UK dying from asbestos-related diseases. Now, that figure is really shocking.
It is shocking. And just put it in perspective, that's more than double than what people die from road traffic accidents. So if you think about every time you open a newspaper or you listen to the news, you're always hearing about people dying in RTAs, yet there's twice as many dying from mesothelioma and asbestos-related diseases, which is crazy.
Yes, yeah, so just to give you some other facts. So on average, it's estimated that 20 tradespeople die from exposure to asbestos. Really it is tradesmen, because the relation between the latency period of exposure to asbestos and sort of dates back anything from sort of 15 to 50 years. And it's mainly associated with tradesmen.
So on average, they reckon 4 plumbers die each week, 6 electricians die each week, 8 carpenters die each week from those trades.
Yeah, all from this supposed hidden killer. And they actually find that asbestos is really the single biggest industrial killer of all trades within this country. So we're going to cover now, so how do you stop being exposed to asbestos? How do these tradespeople protect themselves? And we're going to take you through some procedures which can help you minimise exposure and hopefully keep you safer in and around working within buildings.
We're not going to wrap you up in cotton wool. We're just going to give you some identifiers and things like that you can think about.
So when we talk about asbestos, it's not always an immediate hazard. Okay. In fact, if asbestos can be maintained in a good condition, that's generally the recommendation that you should follow.
Asbestos is in a good sealed condition. It's not going to harm anybody in that condition. It's only when it's damaged or disturbed that it becomes the actual hazard, when it's releasing asbestos fibre. That's the hazard from asbestos.
Yeah, so what you do need to do is manage your asbestos. So identify where it is, look at the condition that it's in, and if it's in a good condition, that needs to be maintained. If it's in a poor condition, then sometimes you have to do something about that. So whether that be stop people coming into contact with it, or making it safer by either sealing it, remediating it,
bringing it into a good state of repair.
Yeah. So if you can reduce accidental disturbance of asbestos, then you'll obviously reduce the risk of being exposed to it. So what I mean by that is, if you can make sure that people know where it is so they don't disturb it, that's going to reduce the risk of you coming into contact with it. If you can reduce accidental damage of asbestos and airborne fibre, so to do that, obviously you need to know where it is, what type of product it is and what condition it's in. This forms basic requirements of the asbestos regulations, which are essentially all in place to minimise exposure to asbestos.
Exactly that. That's what the regs are there for. They're to keep us safe. If the asbestos regs are followed, then in time it's going to reduce the amount of deaths from this mineral. And that's the main point of them, to keep us safe at work. We all go to work and we want to come home in the same state. And that is the whole purpose and kind of pretense of the regulations, is to keep us all safe at work.
Yeah, and when we're talking about non-domestic premises, the duty to sort of provide the information on asbestos usually falls down to the duty holder, and the duty holder will be the person who has the responsibility for the maintenance and repair of the building. So they've got a duty to provide anyone and everyone working within the building the information relating to where the asbestos is and what condition it's in. So if you're a contractor who's undertaken any works, or if you're the manager who's organising those works, you should make sure that you've got this information before you start works, or you need to undertake a suitable assessment before you undertake the works. And what I mean by that is, if you're, for instance, a electrical engineer or electrician working within the building, you have to undertake an assessment to see if your works are likely to come into contact with asbestos, if you're going to disturb it during your work.
So that kind of covers off not only the non-domestic market, that covers off the domestic market as well. So if you're going to go and work in Mrs. Smith's house, you're going to ask her for asbestos information. she's going to look at you gone out because she's never going to have an asbestos survey. But at that point, because she hasn't got it, it doesn't mean that you just crack on with the works. The responsibility falls back to you to make that assessment to see whether you are likely to come across asbestos within your planned works. So whereas regulation for the duty to manage is asking it from the duty holder side, Reg 5 is putting the responsibility on the employer and those supervising those works in the domestic setting as well.
Yeah, so basically, if you haven't got the information relating to asbestos, then you shouldn't start works. Simple as that. So, before you start work, you need to ask the client or the employer if there is an asbestos register or if they've got asbestos information which is relating to the areas in line with what you're proposing to do. So, your scope of works, basically.
So, if they've got a register and a report that's in line with your refurb and there's no asbestos, well done, crack on. You can literally crack on because it's identified nothing there. It should all be safe for you to go ahead with. However, that's obviously few and far between in the amount of asbestos that's in all of our buildings in the UK.
Yeah, so basically, check the register. If it's in line with your scope of works and it's identified asbestos materials, then yes, you are okay to crack on. If, for instance, there is no information available or it's not sufficient to enable you to do those works, then you'll need to get a further inspection or a brand new inspection to identify if those works are likely to disturb asbestos.
And that also should be thought about if you start a project. So say you get the information and it's all okay, you start a project, but then something changes, client changes their mind or something in the project changes. Before proceeding with that change, you again need to go back and review the refurbishment survey to make sure that that area is still safe and it's okay to access or not.
Yeah, one key thing to remember, if the proposed work does identify asbestos there and you're looking to work in that area, you may need to, 1, get it remediated, or 2, removed, or 3, maybe you need to revise your proposed works.
Yeah, and then that could mean like rerouting, I don't know, sealing, fixing cabling instead of going through the wall or the void or whatever. Just having a real kind of look and see whether you can carry on with your works without disturbing it.
Definitely evaluate the works, see if they can be carried out in a different manner to avoid the risk of disturbing anything. And if you do need to work on the asbestos, make sure that you appoint the correct or suitable contractor before proceeding on to do your works. However, it should be noted that even when these assessments have been carried out and made available, there are some times when things could go wrong and create an emergency situation. In these situations, there are a number of procedures that you should follow which could minimise and control exposure to asbestos. So there's some set of procedures that you can follow that if it all goes wrong, you can help minimise your exposure to asbestos. I'm going to take you through those. So emergency procedure 1, to give you an example, this covers if you discover previously unidentified or suspect material. So you're working in a building, you go into a ceiling void, you've already checked the register and it hasn't identified any asbestos there. But when you open up this ceiling void, you see a suspect panel or suspect material, you're not too sure, you've done your asbestos awareness training, you've got a good idea of what is asbestos and what's not asbestos, but you're just not sure about this material. So what should you do? And when could this happen? So this could be, you've checked the register, there's nothing in there. These situations can happen. It could be human error where the asbestos surveyor hasn't seen it or hasn't gone into that ceiling void for whatever reason. It may be that the register is based on the wrong type of survey.
Oh, that's a biggie as well.
Yeah.
Right. We see no end of contractors crack on off the back of a survey report. Yet when you look at the survey report, it was only a management survey report.
Yes, it's not adequate for those works.
No, and it's not gone into those areas. So no wonder that they're kind of discovered this previously unidentified asbestos because they're the first people to go into that void to actually have a look at it.
Yeah, and sometimes this could be a result of you've had an asbestos survey done, but there's a no access area. So the surveyor actually didn't get into that room on the day of the survey for whatever reason, and that room hasn't been inspected. That's a real key one for if you're looking at asbestos survey reports is make sure you got the right type of survey. Make sure that you check the no access areas.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is with that, once you've checked it, you need to make sure it is satisfactory. So that's a really good point about no access areas there. because that is kind of the really big overlooked point in asbestos survey reports. A lot of the times people just look straight for the asbestos types and what's been identified at site, and they look straight past the no access areas. But with asbestos, everything is guilty until proven innocent. So therefore, everything must be checked or presumed to be asbestos until it's proven otherwise. So they're like the two big areas, obviously what asbestos is at site, but also equally the non-accessed areas. So if you're at work and asbestos is discovered or a suspected item is discovered, what should you actually do?
Well, first of all, you need to stop work. And that includes stopping everyone around that certain area. Because what we don't want to do is get people to carry on working and risk the potential of coming into contact with this suspect or presumed suspect material.
Yeah, we don't want anybody else possibly exposed or anything like that.
Cracking on with their works and
Yeah.
potentially damaging this material.
Exactly.
So the immediate area should be sealed or closed off. So yeah, so this could be as simple as closing the door to the room and restricting it off. If it's in a big open plan area, if you can kind of cordon it off, that would be better. Obviously, if it's in a ceiling void, closing that ceiling void off. Just a few examples of how you can sort of isolate that area.
And then the manager, supervisor, they should be made aware of the situation straight away. So, I don't know, site foreman, whoever's in charge on site needs to be made aware of the situation so they can start looking into it and getting this sorted.
And then really what we need to do is positively identify, is that material asbestos or not? And that should be undertaken by a suitable contractor who's competent to either collect a sample or arrange for a sample of that material to be collected.
Yeah, and that's what we have happen all the while at Acorn. Either, like you say, the trained contractors, they come across things, they take samples, bring them into our laboratory, we analyse them and give them a result, or the ones that haven't had the appropriate training to collect samples, they'll give us a ring, usually an emergency situation because they need to crack on. We'll get a guy out there very, very quickly, bring the sample back to our laboratory, again, analyse it and then report upon our findings.
Yeah. So once that's been identified, whether it's asbestos or not, you then need to think about what you're going to do next. So, for instance, if it's not asbestos, then happy days. You can probably crack on with your works. However, it is asbestos, I would seek advice from a competent person to see what you need to do with that asbestos. And that could be a number of things, whether you need to get it removed because it's in the way of your works, or whether you can work around it, whether that be remediating the asbestos material, depending on the condition of that material.
It is, and it all literally depends on what the works are. Like we said earlier at the beginning of the podcast, it could be rerouting cabling around it, so you don't even have to go through that area. So it could be as simple as, right, there's asbestos up there, we actually don't need to touch it. I'm going to put the ceiling tiles back in place and we're going to reroute it around a different avenue around the walls instead of going through the ceiling void. Something as simple as that.
So that's basically covering if you come across something suspect that you didn't know was there, or...
And you stop. The next one we're going to cover is what happens if you damage asbestos or if you come across asbestos that's been damaged. Again, this could happen in so many different ways. Give me some examples, mate.
So you could be working on a site, come in the next day and the site's been broken into and it's been, criminal damage. You've had some burglars go through and they could have damaged the asbestos. Or it could be as simple as somebody dropped some ink on it or dropped some ladders against the wall and have damaged some asbestos, scaffolding as they're putting it up, or even just general building materials hitting walls, ceiling tiles, etc. Or it could be, the worst case is, you've actually drilled something or you've put your hammer through something.
Yeah, drilled it, broke it, cracked on without thinking and then thought, oh, shit, I perhaps shouldn't have done that. That is the kind of the worst end of it.
Yeah, exactly. That's kind of the every tradesperson's worst nightmare, really. I don't know if anyone's seen the Hidden Killer campaign that HSE developed. They had some good marketing photos and pictures. If you go onto the HSE website and have a look for the Hidden Killer campaign, some real sort of poignant pictures that they created of people damaging asbestos. It was quite powerful at the time. Yeah, definitely check those out. What should you do? You've accidentally drilled some, you've broke some asbestos materials. So first of all, again, we're going back to, you need to stop works immediately. The idea of this situation is you need to minimise the disturbance of the material and minimise the exposure to anyone and everyone around that.
Yeah, so if it's yourself doing it and you've broken something and then you've thought, oh, bugger, I shouldn't have done that, don't finish your job off. Stop work.
Down tools.
Down tools, get everybody else out of this area as well. We don't want to expose anyone else that doesn't need to be exposed.
No. Don't try and take your tools with you. Definitely don't try and start cleaning it up at all, because that's the worst thing you could do. Obviously, you need to basically sound the alarm. So if there's other trades, other people, or other occupants within the area, you need to evacuate those with minimal disturbance to the area. You need to isolate the area as much as you can. Again, it's going back to, if it's in a designated room, it's closing the doors. If you can close windows as you go in, try and do that, and turn off any sort of like ventilation equipment as well, because what we need to try and do is reduce sort of air movement within the area, because when asbestos is disturbed, it releases asbestos fibres. Those asbestos fibres, some of them are so minute, they become airborne. And what we need to try and do is obviously reduce them being blown around the room if we can.
We just want it everywhere in lockdown, really. Seal it off, close it off, get people out of the area. That's the quickest, easiest thing to stop anybody else getting further exposure. Yeah,
but don't get too wrapped up on that, because the most important thing is get everyone out as quick as possible and as safely as possible. Don't walk across the asbestos just to close the window, because, that's going to create a bigger risk of doing that. So, just take a bit of a sensible sort of head on that one. Now, if you've damaged the asbestos and you've had asbestos fibre drop onto your clothes or your overalls or whatever you're wearing, really what we need to try and do is get those clothes off as near to the area as possible. So, if you've had some asbestos dust fall onto you, you need to try and carefully and sensibly take those clothes off by trying to turn them inside out. So as you're rolling your clothes off, you're sort of trapping any debris within the clothes itself, rather than taking them off, really sort of heavy-handed.
Yeah, so don't kind of whip your T-shirt off. Roll your T-shirt up so it's collecting any dust and debris in itself, and before you take it off. If you've got work coveralls on, like workers' overalls or something like that, you unbutton them carefully, again, rolling them off of yourself, carefully, slowly, to try and trap anything, all the fibre, all the dust, all the debris within itself, and then leave those items within the area as well.
Yeah. Next thing, if you have had some contamination on you, once you've got your clothes off, is try and go to the nearest wash facility to obviously wash your hands and any other part of your body that you can or has potentially become contaminated.
Yeah, so if a board's broken above your head and it's hit your face, then you need to go and wash your hands, wash your face, wash your hair, wet all that area down, clean that area down afterwards as well, dispose of those items, put them back near the area or bag them up so that they can be dealt with separately as well.
Yeah, and obviously once you've sorted yourself out, is then we need to sort of escalate this situation to the appropriate on-site manager, supervisor, whoever it may be, so we can start the process of dealing with this emergency situation. And what that may entail is getting specialists in to obviously deal with that safely and correctly in line with the appropriate approved code of practices. So I think that kind of covers what to do in that emergency situation. Hope you found that useful, and there's some pointers in there. Obviously, if you do need any help with actually putting these procedures in place, please get in touch with us. If you go onto Facebook and search for Asbestos Knowledge Empire Community, you can go on there, join the community, and that's where you have access to myself and Ian. If you've got any questions, got any concerns, we're happy to talk you through these procedures one-on-one. And obviously, we can help you write these procedures if you need them for your company or your business.
And also with that, if you've got concern that this may happen or your guys need asbestos awareness training, we can undertake that training for you as well to, one, make them asbestos aware, and secondly, run through emergency procedures. So at the end of the day, everybody is being kept safe.
Yeah, I do think emergency procedures are really the key element if you're looking at from a asbestos awareness point of view. These are procedures that at the end of the day will help keep you safe and minimise the risk of being exposed to significant asbestos fibre really in those situations.
Yeah, so thanks for listening, and remember, asbestos first, not last.